All right, and then I'll put y'all on a mute if you don't mind. There we go. All right. Well, welcome. It's amazing that we have 2 weeks under our belt already. This is our third Sunday together. So thanks for your presence, first of all, and thanks for your continued engagement with the experience. Tonight, we're going to do something a bit different from our previous 2 Sundays, actually quite a bit different. Just to maybe kind of recap, our first week we contemplated the evolving universe as God's body, and we talked about this as the first incarnation, like at the Big Bang moment, like God first materialized in the material world. And, we sort of considered the wonder of the evolving universe through that cosmic vision of incarnation. And then last week, because love can only express itself in the particular, we spent time with the Holy Family. Because, for us Christians, the birth of Jesus is like the Big Bang moment in the evolution of our own humanity, our own consciousness. But last week, we really tried to bring the focus to Mary, who, for Christians, for the last 20 centuries, has been an example, has been an intimate spiritual companion for many of us. She's an expression of the divine feminine, which really has a beautiful place in such a masculine church. But perhaps most importantly for our purposes, it was her yes that made all the difference, right? Her yes. And so this week, our prayer is going to get very personal. Our focus this week is how the incarnation is expressed in the lives of each of us. And you might ask, how am I being called to let the Christmas miracle happen again in me? Or how can I let God's love become a little more reflected in the life that I'm living now, in the journey of my years here on earth, right? So Christ is desiring to be born again in and as us, right? So tonight we're going to have 2 guided prayer experiences. I'll lead you through two very different experiences. And the first is going to be what it's like for us to say yes. We're going to, if you will, practice Mary's fiat. And, that'll go about 30 minutes or so. And then we'll have some time for small groups. And then our second prayer practice is going to come from the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. And it's this contemplation that begins the second week of the exercises. If that language is weird, don't worry about it. But the contemplation is the call of Christ the King. And we'll revise it a little bit in terms of the way we do it this evening. But my hope is that those 2 prayer experiences will assist in launching our week, right? Launching your week. And we'll certainly conclude like we always do by just making sure everyone is ready for week 3. Okay, I think that is a good kind of review. So hopefully you had time to spend with Mary this week and had opportunity to engage your imagination, imagining certainly the details of her Annunciation, and then we move to the Visitation, and then the Nativity. But reflecting on what's often called her fiat, and fiat is a Latin word, and it refers to her yes to God, right? In that Luke story, her "Let it be done to me according to your word." But like we said last week, since Luke gives very few details on actually how it really happened, this is where the imagination really comes into play, or can come into play, for our prayer. So I'm going to just pull up a quick PowerPoint. I want to show you a couple pieces of artwork. All right, these are pieces you probably have seen before, and they're some of the more famous renderings of the Annunciation. And again, one of the things that Ignatius invites us in our imaginings is really to focus in on the humanity of the gospel characters, in this case, the humanity of Mary. And one of the things that's true, I think, in a lot of Christian art is she's sort of portrayed as superhuman in a way, right? Like these are all, again, capturing the moment of, or whatever, if it's a moment or a day or however long, that the experience of the Annunciation. But if you notice, like Mary is portrayed here as very serene, right? She's often depicted as praying. Everything is in order, like she's in like a very orderly place. Like she seems to be all very put together. She's enveloped in the light of God, or like the light of the Spirit. Like there's light capturing her around her. And again, Luke gives us very few details, but one of the things he does say is that during the Annunciation, she has this experience of being afraid and perplexed. And so, a lot of these more famous renderings of the Annunciation don't necessarily capture that. And so let's return to that one that we looked at last week. And here again, this is this piece by Osawa Tonner. And just notice like the difference in this piece compared to those more famous renderings. Mary is sitting here at the edge of a bed, and it's an unmade bed. Like there's blankets sort of tossed all around, and it looks like she just sort of put her robe on. She doesn't look nearly as put together and as in order as the other depictions are. And one of the things I find most interesting is the light of God is not enveloping her, right? It's apart from her. She's looking at the light, right? And she's looking at it not serenely necessarily, but sort of with puzzlement or concern, or like I think Tanner is really trying to capture some of the perplexity or fear that was part of the experience. And in the original painting, and you can't really make it out here, the beam of light appears almost as a shape of a cross. And certainly being under Roman rule, she would have been familiar with crosses and crucifixions. And so what God is asking her is, troubling, and it's mysterious. And as we know, it's also, there's something about it that's very attractive. And Gabriel, without really saying how, assures her that, God will bring forth blessing and favor and salvation for all. Like the divine will do wondrous things for her because this is the invitation, if you will. So I show you that just again, sort of recenter us on the experience of Mary as we think about our own experience. And again, Jesus is not going to be born in Bethlehem again this December 25th, but Christ is certainly desiring to be reborn in your heart and reborn in my heart. And for that to happen, we're called to follow Mary's example and offer our own fiat, right? Our own yes to God. And so this Advent season, the circumstances of each of our lives, like we're all living very unique and different lives, but there's circumstances in each of our lives, I'm sure, that fill us with things that frighten us, that confuse us, that perplex us at times. And there's also things that attract us, right? Things that offer some promise, some new possibility, even if, it's sort of unclear what those promises and possibilities may be. But like there's something life-giving too in our life that, or, we wouldn't show up for a retreat, certainly if that wasn't the experience. So just like Mary, God's call is found within the circumstances of our own lives. And so being open to those circumstances is essential for our discernment. Like that is really the essential key, and why Mary's fiat is such an important example for all Christians. I'll put it this way. We can't truly see or understand anything or really anyone if we begin with a no, right? If we begin with a no, it sort of shuts things down immediately. We have to start with a yes of basic acceptance, right? Which means we don't jump too quickly to label. We don't jump too quickly to categorize or judge things as good or bad, as for us or against us. Father Ed's homily at Old St. Pat's at the 11, talked about the importance of humility. Like starting with yes is a humble stance. Paula D'Arcy, the Christian writer Paula D'Arcy, has a great line. She says, God comes disguised as our life. Right? God comes disguised as our life, which is another way of saying that God becomes what God loves. So to be open to our life, even like the troubling and perplexing and difficult experiences in our life, is to be open to God, right? And so in the spirit of Mary's fiat, tonight, I want to invite you to identify something in your own life, in your own real circumstances. Most likely it'll have to do with uncertainty or change. And we'll practice offering first a no and then a yes to those circumstances and see how the Spirit moves us in each of those practices, if you will. And certainly, like the spirit of our times, we find ourselves more often than not to be against, like to be defensive, to resist. Like so often, like the energy of the day is to start with no. And so may this practice give you a taste of just how important our yes is to the spiritual path. Okay? So again, I'll guide us through this experience. It'll probably go maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes at the most. And so what I'd invite you to do, if you haven't done so already, is, I'll make sure I did, silence your devices, just to make sure you're not distracted. I'm going to pull up that PowerPoint again and just put a candle on our screen. But you might want to turn your video off, just because sometimes that just helps mitigate being self-conscious on Zoom. Like, you don't want anybody looking at you meditating, for goodness sakes. So let's return to this. And I'll find that candle. Here we are. Beautiful. All right, so I invite you to just readjust yourself in your chair, sort of retake a posture, find a new position, and find a posture, position that allows your body really to feel some sense of stability, right? So helpful to have the feet on the floor, seat to the back of your chair, your palms resting comfortably in your lap. I invite you to shut down the eyes, close down the eyes. It's a posture of prayer that balances a sense of uprightness, engagement, with a sense of comfort and ease, right? So make sure you're in also a very comfortable position. And again, the invitation is to shut down the eyes, because you're going to be keeping your attention focused inwardly on all that's happening, not in the world around you, but rather in the world within you, right? So the first thing I'm going to invite you to let go of is the external world, right? All the demands and things that you've got going, that you are dealing with. If you could just put those to the side, you can pick them up again. Just let yourself settle into this moment, as if there's no place else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. Just start by taking a nice full breath in through the nose. And as you do, see if you can really fill your belly, breathe down into your abdomen. And then with a long, slow exhalation, make the SH sound, shh sound. Exhale with that shh, like you're shushing someone. And as you do your best to empty all the air out of your lungs. And then once you've emptied all the air out of your lungs, notice how the next breath is so buoyant and effortless. And then again, exhale through your mouth with an audible sigh. So we're going to repeat that pattern a couple more times. It's 2 breaths in total. Taking a full breath in through the nose, breathing deep into the belly. Exhaling out with that shh. Doing your best to empty all the air out of your lungs. And then notice how the next breath is effortless, easy. And then as you let go and exhale that breath, do it again out your mouth, but with an audible sigh. One more time at your own pace, breathing in through the nose, filling the torso with life, filling your belly. Breathing out with the shh. Letting that second breath be effortless and buoyant. And then letting it go with a sigh. Just return your breath to its natural pattern. And again, settle in and just become still. And in the stillness, become more aware of your body. Just letting your attention scan through the sensations present in your body. Noticing how it feels to be alive on this Sunday afternoon. Now, can you bring a slight smile to your lips? Not a big grin, but just a slight smile, a curl to your lips. And as you do, notice any changes that your smile brings to how you feel. How your smile can further soften you, open you. Can you let your eyes smile as if you were looking at the world with love and kindness? Again, keeping the eyes closed, but smiling with them nonetheless. Maybe you can even feel a smile come across your heart. Just let your smile create a sense of welcome and receptivity for what's to come. Like a receptivity as in, here I am, Lord. Here I am. So let's begin the practice. So I invite you to begin scanning your life as it is right now, the circumstances of your life. And sense an area of your life where you're struggling to let go. Where perhaps change is afoot, and that change is difficult or unwelcome. Or like so many figures in Scripture, you just don't feel capable or worthy of maybe what your life is asking of you right now. And take your time here and let something come to you. Don't necessarily jump to the first thing that comes to mind. Looking at specific circumstances, it might be changes in your own health or the health of a loved one, changes brought on by your job or relationship. Someplace in your life that you're resisting or you're perplexed or frightened. And as you settle on a challenging situation, allow that situation to draw you into it. Like, let the situation come into the foreground of your awareness. Like how it is, what it is. Can you get a sense of what is so challenging about it? What's so difficult about it? Like, what is it here that really feels troubling for you? And as you encounter what's troubling, you may also experience some feelings, perhaps strong feelings like fear, anger, grief, or sorrow. You may feel the body tense up. So sense the feelings, sense the sensations in the body as they arise. And now, in order to see firsthand how we can resist our experience or push away or avoid feeling what's difficult in our lives, I'd like you to try the following experiment. Just begin by saying no, like saying a silent no to this experience, to this situation, sensing what you don't like here, and saying no to what you're experiencing as the pain, the difficulty of the situation. Mentally directing a stream of the word no to what's changing. No to the feelings that are experienced here. The unpleasantness of the fear, the anger, the grief. Let the word no carry the energy of rejecting and pushing away what you're experiencing. Like, this is wrong. I don't want this. I don't like this. If you notice that your mind has become distracted, gently but firmly bring it back again to the situation, back to this steady stream of no. Now let me invite you to let go of your stream of no. And let's take a minute or two just to reflect on what it's like to communicate no to a specific experience in your life. What does the resistance feel like in your body? Maybe there was tightness, pressure. What happens to those painful feelings, the anger, the fear, the grief, when you say no? You might imagine what it'd be like in the days and weeks to come whenever this situation arises. If you said no, moving through the world with the thoughts and feelings of no. What's your sense of yourself as you say no? Do you like yourself when you're saying no? And what's your sense of God when you're saying no? Or even aware of God? Do you feel closer to God? Closer to peace? Closer to love? Now, friends, let me invite you to open your eyes and give yourself a quick stretch, however that feels good. Kind of like you're erasing an Etch-a-Sketch pad. And let's find a new posture. Again, settling back into your chair. Finding a position where you can be alert as well as relaxed. Closing down the eyes. You might take a full conscious breath or two in through the nose, long, slow exhale out through the mouth. Now bring to mind the same troublesome and perplexing situation. And allow yourself to once again to go to the most difficult part of it. Noticing what you resist, what feels wrong. Doing your best just to really get a sense of it. This time, I invite you to begin saying yes to exactly what's happening inside of you. Spend some time gently, kindly, directing a stream of the word yes toward the situation that's causing you pain and difficulty. Knowing that saying yes is not agreeing to unhealthy behavior. Saying yes is not affirming that your life is as good as it can be. Rather, it's an honest and courageous willingness to be fully present to your life as it is. Specifically, this difficult part, this perplexing part of your life. So let your yes allow you to relate to this situation in a spirit of allowing. Just like Mary's example of let it be. Letting all the feelings, the body sensations you're experiencing that accompany this situation be held in an environment of yes. Whatever's arising within you, explore what happens when you meet it with the openness and gentleness of yes. Again, whether it be sadness, fear, anger, can you say yes? It's okay to feel this. This too can be included in my heart. Even if you experience waves of resistance in your body, even if there's still a sense of no, include that with your yes. It may be the case that you're only feeling bored right now, restless right now. Then yes to that. A gentle, consistent yes to however you find yourself in this moment. Now, friends, you can put your yes to the side. Let's spend a minute or so reflecting on what it was like to say yes. And what happens to the troubling feelings as you say yes? Do they change at all? Does your mind seem more expansive or more contracted? Is there a tightening or an opening in the body when you offer your yes? Again, imagine in the weeks to come, whenever the situation arises, you could pause, feel what's happening in the moment, and directly meet the experience with yes. What's your sense of yourself as you say yes? Is it the kind of self you'd like to be? What's your sense of God when you're saying yes? Do you, again, feel closer to God, closer to peace, closer to possibility? And here's the deep spiritual truth of Mary's fiat and our yes. As we offer less resistance to the circumstances of our life, there's more space for the Spirit of God to infuse those circumstances with possibility and creativity. It creates the fertile soil for Christ to be born again in our hearts when we offer our yes. So let me invite you to close this practice with just a final period of silence, reflecting on the situation that maybe, like Mary's, has some measure of confusion, fear, promise, possibility. What's the Holy Spirit desiring to call forth in you? Maybe greater freedom, more acceptance, an increase in kindness toward yourself, someone else, more trust. Spend this next minute of silence reflecting on that. Now, friends, when you're ready, And in your own time, slowly begin to bring your awareness back to the room you find yourself in, opening up the eyes, wiggling the fingers, the toes, maybe giving your body a little stretch. Hello, Melissa. If you'd like to turn your video back on. I'm going to break us into 3 groups and give you about 15 minutes or so. And again, you might take turns and just, if you haven't met, maybe you are going to be with some new folks, just introduce yourself, where you're zooming in from, and then just name what's arising in you now, after the meditation, after your week of prayer, something that feels important for you to say, important for you to share, and then let's give our gift to one another of our attentive listening. Okay? So I'll see you back here in 15 minutes. Recording. All right. So this one, we'll spend, I'll try to kind of make this about 15, 16 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes or so to chat and kind of get ready for the week to come. All right. Like I mentioned, in this week, the inquiry we're bringing to our prayer is, how is Christ desiring to be reborn in me this Christmas? Or we can think of it in terms of Mary, like, what is my yes that will allow me to both receive more deeply the love and spirit of God and then make a return of that love in the world? So there's this important part in the spiritual exercises where Ignatius has us pray this meditation called the Call of Christ the King, and in it we imagine this earthly leader who's very noble and virtuous, doing all these great things and calling us to follow, to accompany that person in the mission of that. And then the second part is we imagine Christ calling us. And so really what Ignatius is after is like reflection on, what does God's dream for the world mean for me, like my participation in God's project? And so Ignatius creates this imaginary scene for us to enter. But remember, Ignatius created these meditations in the 16th century. And even though the call of Christ the King is not about monarchy or conquest, I think sometimes, just from my experience of people praying the exercises, the imagery of kings and kingdoms can be a little off-putting for 21st century America. So I've reframed the contemplation a little bit, and the call will come through the lens of kinship rather than kings and kingdoms. So I'm going to be drawing on, if you're familiar with Father Greg Boyle, who's another Jesuit, and for him, kinship is the call, the example of Jesus. It's the movement toward relationship where no one is outside the circle of belonging. And really all that, we move toward the margins, because we're trying to dissolve any notions of us and them, right? And certainly there are just so many experiences of us and them these days. So again, you might think of this call of kinship to establish right relationships with all the brothers and sisters of Christ that, are within your circles of influence. And so I'm going to guide you through this. And again, you'll be invited to use your imagination to sort of imagine the details. I'll just sort of give you the container, and you can fill in the contents with your imagination. Is there anything else I want to say? The other thing that it's important, I think, to say is that when we think about, particularly Greg Boyle using that term margins, like here the margins are not just external, right? They could also be internal. So for those of us who, again, may be dealing with loss or deep pain, or sometimes, we're struggling with a compulsion, the call to follow Jesus, we don't want to bypass these realities. Like it may be the marginalized parts of ourselves that Jesus wants us to pay attention to in this call, right? Again, the call is going to be unique for each of us, and it's found only in those particular concrete circumstances of the life that we're living. So let's see. Let's just open ourselves up and see how this goes. And again, I'm going to put that PowerPoint up if you want to turn your video screen off. It's not necessary, but you're certainly welcome to. Let's see, did I do that correctly? I did not. There we go. There we go. All right, friends. So let me invite you again to just settle in again. Find your posture. Find that position where you can feel comfortable and remain alert. You can shut down the eyes. Again, prayer is by and large an inside job, at least this type of prayer. And taking a moment of stillness, just become aware of God's loving presence. God's loving presence among us. Loving presence around you. God's loving presence within you. At the start of every meditation and the exercises, Ignatius gives us a grace to pray for, and here the grace is to hear Jesus' call to deeper kinship. Kinship both with others and the places of myself that are hurting. So again, it could be an external, it may be an internal call. But we pray for the grace to hear that call with freedom and respond with generosity. So I'm going to give you the setting and then invite your imagination to sort of create the picture. So imagine yourself among a group of diverse people in an ordinary gathering space of your choosing. Maybe a church hall, could be a park, might be an auditorium. As you begin to create the scene in your mind's eye, just notice who's present. There are some who seem confident and at ease. Again, can you imagine them in your mind's eye? There are others who appear tired, weary, invisible, right? How do they look? There are people in this gathering that you feel drawn toward and those you instinctively avoid. Imagine those groups differing in appearance. And as you scan the crowd, you notice that Jesus is also here. He's not elevated or set apart from everyone. He's among the people. You see him listening, talking to others, present. You notice how Jesus gathers people around him. He does it not with authority, but with tenderness. Can you imagine, can you picture people being attracted to the person of Jesus and how that would be? And as you begin to really focus in on his interaction with others, you hear him say, I want everyone to experience the goodness and mercy of God, where love replaces fear, compassion replaces judgment. I want to dissolve the notions of us and them. Create a world where no one is outside the circle of belonging. And this work, he says, requires creating right relationships with those who are close to us and those we keep at a distance. He says it may cost you your comfort and won't be easy, but it will change you for the better. As he says this, notice how he looks at each person he offers this call to. Not to pressure, but looks at them with acceptance and invitation. And can you notice how this diversity of people are drawn to his presence and are offering him their yes? And now, imagine him standing before you. How does he look at you? Can you hear him speak your name? How does he speak your name? He invites you to be part of his mission. He speaks to you, not in general terms, but very personally, as he says, where there's distance, draw near. Where there's judgment, choose mercy. Where there's pain, do not abandon yourself. Notice what begins to stir in you. Ignatius invites us just to stay with whatever arises. There's no expectation to resolve or heal anything. Just be present to this encounter with Jesus. Inviting you to be part of his mission. And then in the closing minute of this meditation, just speak to Jesus as one friend would speak to another. Whatever's in your heart regarding his call, regarding the start of this week. And then allow Jesus' response to come in whatever way it comes, maybe through imagined words, emotion, simple silence and presence. Now, friends, gently just begin to move your body. Wiggle your fingers, your toes. Gently begin to move your attention to the outside world. Open your eyes. On your screen, there's a new version of the Principle and Foundation. That'll be our morning offering this week. So I invite you to pray it along with me. I'll read it on behalf of all of us. God of creation, love is who you are. Love is what you do. You are love-loving. You formed this world in love and fashioned us for love. Every created thing invites us to recognize your love at work and to make a response of love. Let me be grounded in you, loving God. I am prone to lose your lens of love and mistake the means for the end. Give me the freedom and awareness to not misuse all you have made. May created things enable me to more deeply know you, the Creator. And always remind me of your foundational purposes in the shifting circumstances of my life, whether better or worse, richer or poorer, in or out of favor, in sickness or in health. Help me recognize that every moment is an opportunity to love. By your grace, may my loving resemble yours, and may I find my unique place in your project of love. Amen. That principle and foundation was revised by Lauren and Oliver, who some of you have for spiritual direction. And again, that'll be in tomorrow's email, and I'll invite you to shift that to the morning offering as it sort of works, I think, nicely with our week of prayer this week. Before I say anything about the coming week, let me just, since I've been doing all the talking, see if there's any questions you all have or anything you may want to offer.
I've always wanted to pray using the spiritual exercises. I'm embarrassed that I didn't, having gone to a Jesuit college, but it's been really lovely. Thanks, Al.
You're welcome, Bridget. All righty, friends. Well, this week there are 4 exercises, and we're going to start with the first 2 are sort of a combination. You're going to have a dialogue with the young Jesus. And here we're really invited to imagine the first 30 years of Jesus's life, which, again, we don't know anything about really. But thinking about how he came to his call, right? Again, I'd encourage you to really ground yourself in his humanity as you imagine his life and engage in relationship and conversation with him. And in doing so, you're going to be invited to think about your own call. And so you and Jesus will kind of do that together. And that'll be Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, it kind of pivots a little bit, and we look at the holy thief and how there's a part of Advent, like there's a lot of Advent stories, not so much this year, I guess, on Sunday, but definitely during the week, that's like God coming and unexpectedly in the night and stealing stuff. And so sometimes God is a thief and like is wanting to take something away from us, like to help us, receive more of his love and mercy and become a better reflection of his light in the world. So maybe there's something in our life that we're being called to get rid of, to let go of. And so that holy thief is that meditation. And then the last meditation is a question on what in you waits to be born. And so we'll work through those 4 first meditations. There'll be a review on Friday and Saturday. And then for next Sunday, I'm going to invite you to actually bring something that is representative of some aspect of your retreat, and we'll use that for part of our closing. But not to worry, on the Friday and Saturday email, I'll let you know what that is. And then finally, next Sunday is our closing, and what I'd like to do as part of that Sunday is really just help us sort of recognize that the retreat isn't over next Sunday. That part of the reason that you have access to the website is that this material may inform your prayer for weeks or even months to come. And so we'll talk about how sort of the rhythms and what's happened these 3 weeks, we can build on those if we're called to build on them. Part of the advantage, I think, of doing an at-home retreat rather than going to a retreat house is like you're having to kind of develop your own rhythms in the journey of your kind of daily living. So it's not like you're removing yourself from your typical routine. You're finding how to have consistent prayer time during your routine, which again, I think is very helpful. So we'll talk more about that next week. Okay, we still have 3 minutes, but I mean, if you'd like, I'd stay as long as you want if there's more questions. But what else shall we talk about before we say goodbye?
Well, I'll just say thank you. I thought it was a very nice session and I appreciated it. And I was here the whole time.
Well,
So.
thank you, Connie. All right, everyone. Well, let's pray for one another this week, and your emails will arrive starting again 5 a.m. tomorrow. The recording will be on that first email as well as the website. I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you, Al. Thanks, everybody.